Hi, everyone, and welcome to Mission Success Women in Multifamily, MHN's monthly podcast series dedicated to the women shaping the future of the industry. I'm your host, Laura Valean. For many women, success is about seeing possibility where others see obstacles and having the courage to move first. That's exactly what my guest has done. Lissette Calderon is the president and CEO of Neology Development Group, one of the few female residential developers building in South Florida today. A Miami native and daughter of Cuban immigrants, she has helped reimagine parts of Miami's urban core, developing attainable housing for the people who keep the city moving. Let's get to know her better. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Let's dive right in. And I'd like us to start this conversation by thinking about probably one of the most important figures in your life, your father. We're celebrating Father's Day this month, and I know your father was your hero. You've often spoken about walking job sites with him as a little girl. So my question is, when you walk one of your own job sites today, is there still a moment when you feel his presence most strongly?
Oh, my goodness. Every time I walk a job site, I feel his presence. My father taught me that no was really someone else's limitation, not my limitation. And he always taught me to push through what others perceived that they couldn't. And those are lessons that I still carry with me, every single day. And that led me to where I am today. When I started my first high rise as a, young Latina woman, first generation, it was a lot of firsts, but it was because of all the lessons that he taught me. That I never saw those as limits, but more so as opportunities and just one more challenge to overcome. So I would absolutely say it's every single time. It's funny because when we were young, we would always grow up. I would grow up and he would always play this song, "Eye of the Tiger." And it was about, and it was, whenever I was studying or I was doing something in school, he would always play "Eye of the Tiger." And when we would drive, he would play it. And when my father unexpectedly passed away in high school, I found myself in college playing "Eye of the Tiger." And now here at work, sometimes I catch myself also playing it when I'm having, late nights. But it was really about, thinking about the challenges and how you overcome challenges. But what really makes me smile is that I walk into my daughter's room sometimes and they're, they were studying, now they're off in college. But now they're playing "Eye of the Tiger" and they never met their grandfather. So what I think is really interesting as an influence is that here's a man that they never met that continues to influence now all these generations. So he influenced me and now that continues to influence on. And it, when you think about kind of my father and the importance in Father's Day, I think what's really telling is that his influence didn't end with me. It continues and lives on through them. So of course, every single day he's with me.
I know you also he imagined building a company with you one day. You did build it, but without him physically there, as he passed away when you were in high school, right? Has success ever felt bittersweet because of his absence?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely bittersweet. Every single time I think about what if and how much fun would we be doing this together? How much fun would we be having? And just being able to walk into the office and ask for his advice and seek his guidance. He was the smartest person I ever met, even though, he was completely self-made and didn't have a formal education like I did. So I think of it every single time, like how much fun would we be having? But I also am a person of great faith. So I know and I believe that he's been building this with me all along. And the lessons that he taught me from the very beginning about grit and tenacity and the work ethic that, he instilled long live with me. But of course, that's not to say that I would give anything in the world to walk another job site with him just one more time. I didn't realize how lucky I was when I was a little girl walking those job sites, and I would give anything to do it with him again.
Yeah, I totally understand. I also lost my father when I was 22. So I totally understand what that must feel like.
Absolutely.
So you said you had a formal education. You started your career in investment banking in New York, but you left that field. And when you left it, you previously said in an interview that it felt like a failure at that time. What did that version of you misunderstand about failure that the woman you are today understands deeply?
I think, and Laura, sorry for your loss. And I'm sure that loss shaped you. Those kinds of losses shape who you are, especially when it's early on.
Right.
And when I think about it, and I think kind of how my father's legacy touched every aspect of my life, he touched this one as well. I mean, at the time when I graduated from college, I thought that success meant following the path that everybody else expected of me. Here I was, this Wharton educated person, a finance major, great mathematician, very numbers oriented. I had this fantastic job in investment banking in New York. And from the outside, everything was perfect. Everything looked like I had achieved the dream.
Right.
And so when I walked away after doing that for a certain amount of time, because I realized that I was good at it, but I was never going to be great at it because it wasn't my passion. It wasn't what I lived and breathed and wanted to do every single day. So when I walked away a few years later, I felt like the biggest failure in the world, walking away from what would be the quintessential dream. So to me at that time, that felt like a failure. And it took me kind of some time to figure out that failure would have been following the path that everybody expected of me is the opposite. Leaving investment banking was not a failure. I would say it was the first time I trusted myself to make a decision like that. It was the first time that I was starting to build a life based on my own terms. So I think it was really reframing what failure was like and realizing that failure wasn't about fulfilling everybody else's expectations. Failure would have been had I not fulfilled my expectations.
Right, right. And after that short career in investment banking, I know you spent a couple of years with the Related Group and Jorge Perez, but then you founded your own company and broke ground on your first development, Lofts, at 28 on your birthday. I can only imagine what was I doing at 28? I certainly wasn't doing big things. But at that age, did you understand the magnitude of what you were doing, or did that only become clear later as you grew up and matured?
Gosh, not at all. I don't think I had an idea of the magnitude of what we were doing. I think it was a combination of grit and tenacity with a big combination of naiveness.
Right.
Look, I knew it was going to be hard. And I was used to working hard, and I worked hard for George. And so if I was building high rises for George, I mean, how could I not build it for myself? But what I didn't realize at the time was that, to build the high rise without George's balance sheet and institutional relationships and track record and support was a very different, challenging animal. I think sometimes youth is an art form. And I think the fact that, I didn't understand the reason that I could fail or would fail. And I think when sometimes people get caught on that, maybe they don't ever start, but because I didn't understand that, I was able to do it. I was always a fighter, and I was always used to kind of, grit and tenacity and working hard. But I absolutely, looking back at 28, I had no idea how ambitious that really was. It was just one more thing that I had to do. So yes, I laugh about it and I think about it. And it was absolutely a combination of, yes, ambition, grit, tenacity, but it was a big combination of naiveness.
Yeah. And then throughout the years, you've built in neighborhoods before the market fully recognized their value. How do you know when you're seeing potential others are missing versus simply taking risks others are wise enough to avoid?
There's a book that I love, and it's called Sun Tzu and the Art of War. And there's a line that always resonates with me: the battle is won before it is ever fought. And to me, that resonates kind of in everything, in how I live kind of my life and in how I look at business and approach business. So what everybody usually thinks is instinct is actually preparation that nobody really sees. So, by the time that, you have this vision, it's not a vision. Yes, there's a certain amount of intuition, but I would say that there's just this extensive analysis that goes into demographics and transit and public support and private support and housing demand and economic trends and macro trends and everything else that's going on, and neighborhood fundamentals. So I would say that years of homework appear to be vision, but it really wasn't guessing. I would say that vision is really, when I think about it, to me, vision is a certain amount of intuition with a very deep analysis behind it. Mm-hmm. So it's a hybrid of both. And that's how I would probably answer it. That, yes, it may look, that it was very pioneering, and yes, it's pioneering, but there's a lot of analytics and facts behind it.
Right.
I just dug deeper.
Yeah. You've mostly been active in the Miami River and Allapattah areas. But these areas are not just development stories for you. They're places you helped reimagine. Is there ever a tension between transforming a neighborhood and preserving the soul of what was already there?
Well, I think that's very much at the ethos. That's a great question, Nada. I think that's very much at the ethos of who we are, because we understand that we have a responsibility to do conscientious development. And we believe in authenticity and in neighborhoods. And we don't believe in transforming, but really reimagining them and uplifting neighborhoods. So our goal is not just to build a building. Our goal is to build neighborhoods and communities. So when we go into these neighborhoods, we don't think just about our high rise and just what's there. We think about the parks in the neighborhood. We think about the sidewalks, the lighting, the safety, the public spaces, traffic, the impact, the trees. And again, because we are now part of that community, we think about it. And for us, it's very important. It's a great responsibility that we carry as our mission, that we are stewards of that neighborhood. So we're not ever looking to go into a neighborhood and replace its authenticity, its culture. Like we're not going to go into a neighborhood and try to replace it with B, but rather it's take a neighborhood and really bring that back to its original essence and work with that. Our job is not to erase history. Our job is to really thrive and work with that history and help the neighborhood thrive.
And when you look back with honesty, was there a moment when you were really scared? I know you mentioned earlier that when you started on your own, you didn't have the balance sheets of the related group and all of that. So was that one of the moments when you were most scared throughout your career?
When I think of probably the defining moment that scared me the most, and there's always reasons not to sleep at night, and you think about it, but I would say the big defining moment, if you're going to ask me one, it was in 2001, and it was Lofts 9/11. And that I had my first project, Lofts, under contract. I had used up all my savings. I had done everything I had to get that land under contract, and we were well underway undertaking reservations, but we hadn't closed on the land. And I had secured a lender, and 9/11 happens. September 11, 2001 happens, and all of a sudden my lender backs out. And I remember, and it was Thanksgiving. I even remember it was Thanksgiving that, I got the formal letter that I'm sorry, we're not going to go through with this. The world overnight changed, and, what we underwrote then is not what we're underwriting today. So we are going to back out. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, what happened? And I just lost endless days of sleep, endless hours. I couldn't believe, kind of what was happening. But like everything else, it was continue to have that grit, that tenacity. And fortunately, another lender who I had a great relationship with that believed in me and what we were doing, stepped in. But that's not to say I didn't lose a tremendous amount of sleep in it. I felt at the time that all the money, all the responsibility was sitting on my shoulders. And I think that experience taught me that real estate development in particular is not just a financial business. It's very much a mental business. And even today, you have to manage uncertainty, and you have to think about uncertainty, fear, and pressure every step of the way. But if I had to think that one moment where I thought my world was falling apart and I was just laying there thinking what just happened, was Neo Lofts and 9/11.
That was the one. Yeah.
That was the one.
So, yeah. It sounds like your work is very much instinctive. You think about how people live, how they move, how they gather, how they feel at home. When have you trusted your intuition over the spreadsheet? Is it every time or just?
At here in Neology, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is that we are an organization that we say that we are entrepreneurial spirit, but with institutional discipline. And I think that's very telling as to kind of intuition and analytics. The spreadsheet matters, the analytics matter. When you think about it, the fundamentals matter, the numbers matter. But if you think about the early Neo-Lofts, a lot of those early projects, those spreadsheets, those analysis didn't tell the entire story. You had to think about the data, and you had to think about intuition and the long-term story and the long-term trends, because both had to work in tandem. And so I think that's where like intuition and conviction come in. It's taking those analytics, but having really that deeper knowledge. And I think the best deals, and every deal happens when kind of intuition and analytics point in the same direction. Because I think one or the other pointing in different directions doesn't work. I mean, the analytics and the spreadsheets could say something, but if your intuition's not there, it's probably not right. And vice versa. You could have all this intuition, but if the data is not supporting it, or at least showing trends of support, then that's probably not there. And when I think about analytics and data, that's where, the intuition and the comprehension and kind of really looking beyond the surface comes in. It may say, okay, the demographics today are not there. But when I look at the growth, when I look at the charts, when I look at the numbers, I see the private investment coming in. I see the public investment. That tells me. So when Allapattah, for example, early on, we knew that it had all these great fundamentals. I knew it was, the perennial kind of belly button in the human body, as I say. I had 3 mass transit stops. I had the second largest health district. I had the second largest health district in the nation after Houston. So I had all these great fundamentals. I was close to, downtown. I was close to the airport. So I had all these employment hubs around me, plus mass transit. Plus it was an authentic neighborhood. They wanted me in the neighborhood. The community was welcoming me. And if you looked at the demographics there, the demographics said, this is never going to work. I mean, you have to walk away. If you look at it, the rents are not there. The income is not there. Nothing is not there. But I also knew, for example, that Jackson Memorial, which is the largest public hospital, had just floated an $800 million bond for capital improvements. Well, I knew that was going to change the neighborhood. And I knew with that expansion, and the second largest, and they were now going to have the largest emergency room. So I knew a lot of that data wasn't in the current data. So it's really kind of connecting the dots. So I think it's both. And that's how I would probably phrase that question.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. What do you wish people could see about the emotional weight of bringing a project to life? Because developers are often judged by buildings, skylines, numbers, returns, all of that. But yeah, there's also an emotional aspect to it.
I would say that I think people what I wish they knew is that most people only see a finished building. And it's like, oh, here it is, ta-da, beautiful building. but I don't think they see the years of responsibility behind it. Before a building is ever opened, it's 5 years of responsibility and stewardship of underwriting and understanding the neighborhood and acquiring the land and doing the entitlements and doing the construction and everything that opening that building represents. So to me, every project represents, the families that eventually are going to live there, the investors who trusted me to invest in this, the employees and the team on my side and in, my general contractor side and everybody's side whose families depend on what I'm doing. The lenders who believed in my vision and said, yes, we're going to lend you. And then the community that welcomed us in and said, what you do, we know is going to be. So I think it's that responsibility and that emotional toll that a lot of people don't see. And I think that's one of the things that I think I wish they understood, the emotional weight of how many people really are counting on you, on how many people are counting on you to get it right. And, ultimately my business is a business of responsibility. And I think it's being a good steward, and it weighs heavily on me. And I would say what keeps me up at night is knowing that responsibility and everything that I have.
Today, you're still one of the few women leading large-scale residential development in Miami, right? Mm-hmm. What part of being a woman in this business has made you stronger, and what part has simply made you tired?
Okay, that's fair. Look, I think the stronger is something that every woman should embrace. Over 50% of housing decisions are either made or influenced by women. Yet, how many women developers are really out there? And so I think I bring the perspective of 50 or more percent of the decision makers to the table. So I think about safety differently. I think about community different. I think about convenience and functionality and quality of life different than a man would. So when I think about how I feel at 1 o'clock walking my dog is very different than maybe how a man feels. When I think about working out at a gym in the amenity and where the squat machine is located is very different than maybe where a man is doing. And when I think about Zoom rooms like, we have in our buildings, and I think about amenities, I want to make sure that it's through the lens and the prism of a woman. When I think about safety, I don't want random people through my building. Again, a man may not think about some of those. So that's where I think that as a woman, I have a significant advantage because I truly am able to sit firsthand and sit in the driver's seat of over 50% of the decision makers or people who are influencing these housing decisions. I guess what's tiring is women continuing to have to prove to themselves and to others what we're doing before we get the same credibility. And I think sometimes that's exhausting. Fortunately, I do see it changing. But I do hope that the next generation, and that's my goal, and that's what I try to strive for. I do hope the next generation spends less time proving that they belong and spend more time actually leading and creating that impact.
Speaking of the next generation, I know you mentor young women through your Women in Real Estate program. When you look at them, what do you hope they never have to prove that you have to prove?
I hope they never have to prove that leadership has a gender. I think if I had to say it, I would say it, yes, that I hope they never have to prove that leadership has a gender. And I say that because I hope they're judged by their ideas, by their work ethic, by their integrity, by their results, by the impact they've created, and not by their gender. I also hope that they never have to downplay their ambition. I think that's something that we as, my generation had to somewhat grapple with. Ambition is not something that we should apologize for. Ambition is not something that we should hide. I think ambition drives innovation and creativity and opportunity, and it creates change. And I think that we as women should get to the point where we're comfortable owning that ambition and owning it unapologetically. So I would say at the end of the day, the one thing that I hope they never have to prove is that leadership has a gender.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Lissette, we're nearing the end of the conversation, but there are a couple more questions that I like to ask. I know you're wearing multiple hats sometimes at the same time. You're a mother, you're a wife, the daughter of immigrants, the founder, the CEO, a Miami native. All those identities seem to be competing for space. Which one feels most like home to you right now?
Yeah, Laura, you did a great job. Like, all of those. I think I could fit into any of those. And I think any of them I could speak to as what it feels like home. But if you had to make me pick one, I would say it's definitely the daughter of immigrants. And I say that because everything I've accomplished begins there. Mm-hmm. And my parents believed deeply in the opportunities that America provided. They instilled in me an extraordinary work ethic. They immigrated to this country. And I am the first generation to have been born here and to be able to take all these opportunities. So my father taught me to dream bigger than my circumstances. My mother and grandmother taught me about work ethic and perseverance and just the dignity in hard work. One of the greatest lessons that I would say both, and again, as the daughter of immigrants, one of the blessings that I had is that I got to live and be raised in a home with both my parents and my grandparents living in the same home. Because that's what you did when you came to this country with not a lot. I mean, the three generations lived at home. So, I take the lessons, but it was lessons that all of them embodied. It was, about treating people with respect, about working hard, about staying humble, about remembering where you come from. And those are very much a part of me. One of the greatest moments of my life was at Lofts groundbreaking that we spoke about early on, because I could not believe that here I was, the daughter of immigrants, breaking ground on my first high rise just down the street from where my grandmother was a maid. And wow. To think about that, it represented so much more than a building. It represented the dream of generations. It represented the dreams of America. It represented the journey that all of them had taken. So whatever success I've had and whatever I've been able to accomplish, I would say it's really a continuation of their story, and as a result of being the daughter of immigrants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's the one you would pick out of all of those.
Yeah, I think they were all good. Of course, I'm a native Miamian, and today that's unique. I'm an entrepreneur, and there's so many other things, but I would say the daughter of immigrants is probably the one that resonates most.
Okay. One last question. So so far you've helped reshape parts of Miami, entire neighborhoods, but personally, so not professionally, what are you still building within yourself?
This one resonates close to home, because I would say, for the first time in my life, I'm trying to build myself. For so many years, for probably the last 25 years of my life, if not more, my career came first. My children came first. My family came first. My team, my community, everything, my social responsibilities, my civic responsibilities, everything was first, and I was kind of at the bottom, just trying to keep it all together. Now my three daughters are away in college, and this just happened this year. So I think for the first time in my life, I was able to have a little bit of room to say, okay, now what do I need? What does Lissette the person need? So I think, like a lot of people probably that I am where I am, we've really started on this wellness journey and this kind of, you start thinking about life, like next steps. So I've started thinking about my health and my well-being and the things that matters. So I'm making a lot more time to have brunches with friends and spa days with people that matter. And again, it's really learning that balance that for so many years I didn't have. I was on this rocket ship and just doing things. And of course, I always tell and whenever I'm asked to give a speech, they're like, Lissette, how did you do it all? And I said, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at the same time.
Yeah.
So I realized that, I was raising kids, but then I wouldn't go to some of their things because I was busy working. And sometimes, I couldn't do things for myself. So I would have roots, down my hair, but it was because I was working. And if I didn't do that, I would have to go see my kids at a sporting thing because it was important to them, or go to a play. So I was always at the bottom. So I think in probably the last 6 months to a year, I really started thinking about myself more. And that's probably what I'm building on most. I've also learned, recently that saying no is actually okay. And there's times that I have to say no. No, I'm sorry, I can't go to this event. No, I'm sorry, I can't commit to this. No, I'm sorry. Even to my own kids, like, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm doing this. So I think for the first time, I'm realizing that taking care of myself is not selfish. Saying no is okay. I had built opportunities for everybody else. And today I'm also building opportunities for myself, healthier, stronger version of myself. And I guess I'd close it with, for the first time, I am taking care of myself the way for the last, 3 decades or so, I've taken care of everybody else. And that's probably what I'm building right now.
That's great. It was high time you did that. So yeah. Thank you so much, Lissette, for sharing not only your journey, but also parts of yourself and your work that people may not always get to see or to hear about. I really appreciate your openness. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't often get to speak about this. So this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the June episode of Mission Success Women in Multifamily. If you enjoyed this conversation, check out our website on the third Thursday of every month for another inspiring success story. And to make sure you never miss an episode, just follow the Lease Up on your favorite podcast platform. That's where you'll find all of Multi-Housing News' podcast series, including Mission Success. Thanks again for listening. Till next month.